session. Okay. All right. I'm not sure why it's showing up like that, but welcome to period 7, geometry. I'm glad you guys were able to make it. Today's April 2nd, just in case, I need a reminder on the date, seeing as we're at home all the time. Before we get started, I did want to go over a few class rules. One of them is just to be respectful of others, to use the annotation and chat features whenever you're asked. If you have a question, go ahead and raise your hand. You can do it on your screen just like this. And then I know Miss Ross is able to see you all, hopefully. Or also ask in the chat. So that's what the chat is for. If you do have a question, go ahead and ask. I'm not able to see it right away, but I'll be able to get back to you either at the end of class or I'll pause throughout the presentation in order to answer your questions. The next thing is to just make sure to do your best. And again, make sure that you use the annotation and chat features either when asked or if you have a question. A few tips. Try to have a notebook and paper in front of you with the pencil as well for you to take notes. If for whatever reason you're not able to, that's okay. I will be putting up the presentation afterwards on Schoology. So that way you can rewatch this if you need to. If possible, find some quiet space. I know that if you are in somewhere small, it's hard to do so. I live somewhere small, so it's really hard to find some quiet space. So just try your best. Ask questions. So again, use a chat feature or go ahead and raise your hand on your screen like this where Miss Ross can see you. So that way, if you do have questions, we can stop and actually answer those questions. And last but not least, I would suggest attending office hours. Office hours are on Wednesdays and Fridays at 2 p.m. That way, if you do have any questions, we can go ahead and respond to those. All right, so let's do a quick stress check. So 0 is you're in a good space and can focus. A 5 would be that something's bothering you, but you can still focus. And a 10 is that maybe you can't manage your emotions or behaviors right now. So if you're able to in the chat box, I noticed one of our students already responded there. Can you, or wrote something there. So this time I'd like for you to answer the question, how are you feeling? So type in a number and I'll go ahead and also type in mine so that way you can see how this function works. Let's go ahead. I am currently at a 0. Oh, let me. And 0 is that I'm in a good space, I can focus. A 10 is that you can't at all. Thank you. I see some responses coming in. See a couple of 0, so a 0, a 3, okay, and a 2. Good to know. I'm glad that most of us, a 4, okay. So I'm glad most of us that are in a place where we can focus. I know that these times can be a bit challenging and there are things that can bother us. So if I can be of any help, please let me know. And hopefully during this time, this is a time for you to be able to focus on at least school and learn something and get something out of this, even though we have a lot going on in the world, okay? So thank you for sharing. I'm gonna go ahead and go on to the next slide. So if I'm able to, because I'm kind of struggling to go to the next slide. So give me 1 second, please. Oh, there we go. All right, so what's filling your bucket? I did wanna have you guys just think about this for now. We're not gonna fill this out yet, but I did want you guys to think about what are some things that are going on in your world that are making you happy, making you feel good. That means that they're filling your bucket. We have an imaginary bucket where we're filling it with positivity. And there are things in our lives that are draining our bucket that make us feel unhappy, make us feel sad, make us feel negative feelings. So think about what those things are and what are ways we can continue to fill our bucket today. Okay. So for example, for me, one way I'm getting my bucket filled is by being here in front of you and having these lessons. I get to see your faces. That makes me happy. That's filling my bucket. What's draining it? Well, what's draining it is the fact that my internet connection tends to be cutting out here and there. So that can be a little bit stressful. But again, I'm going to keep doing things to try to make me happy and keep filling my bucket. So let's go ahead and start with our lesson for today. I want to make sure we don't take too much time out of that. But our objectives for today, Thursday, April 2nd, are that you will determine the 3 trigonometric functions. So sine, cosine, and tangent for a given angle in a right triangle. Our last session, we covered how to label a right triangle. So we labeled opposite, adjacent, and hypotenuse. And we're going to start discussing SOHCAHTOA. And I know this is something we reviewed before we came onto our online learning when we were doing this in person. So I just want to make sure that we can grasp that knowledge and keep using it so that hopefully we're not forgetting this information. And if you did, that's okay, because that's the point of the lesson, is for us to cover that and get some more practice. Let's go ahead and review our do now. So hopefully by today's lesson, you did the do now for today. And I noticed I did have a couple of submissions. So we're going to go ahead and review this. Before I actually review the content, one thing for do nows is that if you are not happy with the grade that you got, that is absolutely okay. You can retake it and get a better score. Each question is worth a point. So if you did not do the do now, you can go after this session and go take it. Okay, oops, I completely went way too far ahead in my presentation. Sorry about that. So let me try to go back to where I was. So again, the do now, each one's a point. If you feel like you could have gotten a higher score, go ahead and retake it. Even after we cover this, go ahead to do it one more time. You'll be able to get a better score on that assignment. So let's look at number 1. This is something we covered in class throughout the semester. So identify the transformation. To remind you, the transformations are translation, reflection, rotation, and dilation. Translation is when you just slide the shape. And remember, you slide it. Reflection is like what you see in the mirror. You look at yourself in the mirror and that reflection, so it flips. Rotation is when something moves. You rotate it, you turn it. And dilation is when something either becomes bigger or it becomes smaller. Okay, so the shape or the figure changes in size. So when we look at number 1, if you have a chance in the chat box, go ahead and type in what is going on in this transformation. Or in this figure, what transformation are we observing? Is it a rotation? Is it a dilation, a transformation, or a reflection? So if you get a chance in the chat box, go ahead and respond to that question, please. Okay, so I read one response. Does anyone either agree with the fact that this is a rotation or disagree with the fact that this figure is a rotation? Okay, so I see one of our students agrees that it is.
I think Asian put translation.
Okay, and I see a translation. Okay, thank you. So, okay, let's go ahead and thank you for responding to that question. So let's review what rotation means. So rotation, let me go ahead and, okay. So let's see if okay, it does work. All right, so for rotation, remember that when we have a shape, if we rotate it, we're turning it, okay? So that means that it is turning either this direction, it might turn the opposite, so that's clockwise, it might be turning counterclockwise. Okay? Dilation means our shape is either becoming smaller or it's becoming larger. Transformation means it's the same exact shape, but it's just being moved. And a reflection means that we have a shape and it's being flipped. So based on that description, go ahead and in the chat box, I'd like to see whether or not you still feel like your answer is the same thing, or maybe you changed your mind. So please go ahead and write in the chat box. Okay, so I see one change in answer. Thank you. Megan, I'm sorry if I'm not addressing your name specifically, but as I mentioned, I do want to make sure to record this and post this up after. So I will be addressing your chat, but just know that I might not say your name, but I did see one change from rotation to reflection. Okay, I saw another response, so either translation or rotation. Okay, so the change was to reflection, okay? And then translation. All right, so let's go ahead and review the right answer. So the correct answer, and I think you guys all did a great job in responding and making sure that you responded the way you felt was correct. So for this specific question, question number 1, it would actually be, hold on, let me make sure I respond. It would be, let me make sure that we have, and I'm struggling to use this right now because, there we go. It is a reflection. So it does seem, although it does seem like it can be rotations because it can seem like it was just moved around or turned. And it does seem like it can't be a transformation because the shape looks very similar. It looks like it was just like someone just slid it to the left. But this is actually a reflection because if you notice the points, so if we were to label this point A, point B, and point C. This point to this point becomes A prime. Hopefully you guys remember the little symbol. It means that it was changed. B, this one becomes B prime. And this becomes C prime. Notice at the same level. So notice how they're not exactly in the same position anymore. They were just flipped. Question number 2. This is something we covered in our last session, and then we covered this in person as well. So looking at this angle and placing specific focus on this one. Is this adjacent and is this opposite and is this hypotenuse? So take a second to look at the shape, and in the chat box, please go ahead and if you think this is true, are these labels correct? That's what true means. Or false, they are not correct and we need to change something. So go ahead and take some time to respond in the chat box. So we're writing either true if you think it is correct or false if you think it is not correct. Okay, thank you. I saw one response. So by your response, do you mean that you think something needs to be changed? Okay. It is correct. Okay. Okay, and then you feel like it's correct. All right, well, let's take a look at it. So in order to find our hypotenuse, as we covered in our last session, we look at the right angle and we look at what is across from it. That is our hypotenuse. So is that correct? Yes, it is. Okay, so we have one correct for sure. Now, in order to find our opposite, we look at the angle that they're focusing on. They're not focusing on this angle, they're focused on that top angle, so angle X. If we look at angle X and we look in order to find opposite, we do need to find what's directly across from the focus angle. So let's look across, and that is our opposite. So that is incorrect. And then if we look at what side is touching our angle, but hasn't been labeled yet, that is our adjacent angle. So our answer would actually be false because even though we did get hypotenuse correct, the other ones are incorrect. Okay. All right, and it is okay if that one was a little bit challenging. What we will do is we will go ahead and maybe review how to label angles really briefly before moving on to our next portion. Or actually what we'll do is this. If you do need help with labeling angles, I would like for you guys to either attend office hours So again, those are not tomorrow, but starting after spring break on on Wednesdays and Fridays at 2 o'clock. Or go ahead and rewatch that video, and then also message me any questions you may have after the session regarding labeling angles. Sorry, labeling the sides of triangles. So let's look at our lesson for today. Our lesson for today, and again, just remember that in the chat, make sure that you're only answering to the questions, because again, I do get a notification, so it's kind of hard to not be distracted by that, okay? So please make sure to only respond because I don't want to have to turn the chat feature off, only unless I want to be able to leave it open, so if you do have questions, you can ask them, okay? All right, so SOHCAHTOA. Trigonometric ratios are used to help find the length of the sides and the measure of angles. That's what we use SOHCAHTOA for. So sine, in order to find sine of an angle, we take the opposite side and we take the hypotenuse. So it becomes SOH. So if you remember SOHCAHTOA, S stands for sine, O stands for opposite, H stands for hypotenuse. If we keep on going, it is, let's see, give me a second. For cosine, we have the angle, we have, we find the adjacent side and the hypotenuse, and that gives you CAH. So for SOHCAHTOA, the CAH, it's C for cosine, A for adjacent, H for hypotenuse. Again, you focus on the adjacent side and you look at the hypotenuse. And for tangent, it's TOA. So O stands for opposite, A stands for adjacent. So the opposite of the angle, the opposite side, and the adjacent side will give you the TOA portion. All right, we're gonna watch a quick YouTube video because it'll be kind of silly, kind of quirky, you'll see what I mean. But I want you guys to watch this video because I want you to remember SOHCAHTOA. Let's go ahead. And if for whatever reason, oh, didn't mean to. Oh, I don't mean to. Oh, every time. Okay, I was.
Ms. Ventura, I think we can hardly hear it. Is he singing?
Oh, you can't really hear it? It's hard to hear, Miss Ross? Oh. Oh. Okay, hold on a second. Can you hear me? Hello?
Yes, yes.
Okay. Okay, so it was lagging. So what I'll do is, I know it was a silly video, but what we'll do is I'll post the link on in in the chat so you guys can click on it and watch it on your own time. And I'll also put it, actually I'll put it on Schoology. So that way you guys can watch it. It is a silly video, but it's just to help you remember SOHCAHTOA and what those mean. I know it is an interesting little video. He was singing, so if you didn't get a chance to hear it, like I said, I'll put it on Schoology. All right, so let's go ahead and quickly practice this because I know we don't have that much time. Let me see if I can, okay, there we go, type. So we're gonna find the sign of A. So that means that our focus angle is A. This is our focus angle. So we find our, remember, SOHCAHTOA. So since we're finding sine, we need our opposite. Let me separate these, and hypotenuse. So what's the opposite of A? It is 20. What is our hypotenuse? Remember, hypotenuse is whatever's across from this, which is from the right angle, which is 29. And for now, that's all you're doing. Let's look at our next. Now they want us to find the sign of C. So if we look at C, again, we're looking at what's the opposite of C. So opposite, meaning across, it is 21. What is hypotenuse? Because again, we need to find our, oh wait, sorry. No, yeah, we are finding sine. So we're looking at this one right here. Opposite, and then what's our hypotenuse? So remember, our hypotenuse is whatever is across from the right angle. That's 29. That can be simplified, but for now we are leaving it as is. The focus is just to identify the proper sides. Cosine of A. So remember, cosine, we're looking for adjacent this time, and hypotenuse. So cosine of A means we look at angle A. What is adjacent, meaning what is touching it, but is not the hypotenuse? 21. And what is our hypotenuse? That would be 29. Cosine of C. So we look at angle C. What is adjacent, meaning what is touching it, but is not the hypotenuse? That would be 20. And what's our hypotenuse? We know that our hypotenuse is 29. Again, I'm sorry I'm rushing through this, but we do have a limited amount of time. Again, office hours if you have any questions. All right, tangent A. So we're looking at opposite and adjacent. So what's the opposite of A? Oh. And what's our adjacent side? So not our hypotenuse, our adjacent side to A. So what's touching A but is not the hypotenuse? That would be 21. And last but not least, it wants us to find the tangent of C. So for tangent of C, that would be, again, opposite and adjacent, touching it. So hopefully this is kind of familiar from our last session. And by last session, I also mean last session in person. All right, so we only have about 4 minutes left. So what I'm gonna do right now is I'm gonna go ahead and just, instead of giving you guys that time to practice, which I'll try to make sure to leave more time to practice next time, I'll go ahead and respond to this question. But next time what I would do is, if you guys get a chance, watch the video again, and then pause it and actually like practice on your own. So which of the following statements is true for this triangle? So we look at these three. If we look at the sine of the angle, and this is our angle that they're talking about. Sine, remember, SOHCAHTOA. We look at what's opposite of our angle, which is 3, so they got that correct. And what's our hypotenuse? Hypotenuse is whatever across from the right angle. It's 8.5. So this does not say 8.5, so it is not correct. That is not our answer. Let's look at tangent, opposite, and sorry, that's supposed to be an A, adjacent. So what's opposite? It is 3. That is correct. What's adjacent, meaning what's touching it but is not the hypotenuse? It is 8, so that's correct. This is our answer. But let's just double check cosine of this. So cosine, we look at adjacent side, so that's 8. So already we know that's wrong. And we look at our hypotenuse, which is 8.5. This should have been 8 over 8.5. These are not correct. So our answer is 3 over 8, the tangent. All right, we don't have a chance to practice this right this second. I want to make sure I leave time for questions. And there are a lot of practice problems. A chance to practice them on your own. All right, next steps, make sure to complete the exit ticket and the homework assignment that are in the folder titled Work for 4/2/20. Enjoy your spring break. So tomorrow, starting tomorrow, we have spring break. So I will not see you until April 14. You have a week off. Make sure to check your updates on Schoology so you know when the next class is. And make sure to complete the do now before our next class for that date once it is up. It is not up yet. But as soon as it is up, hopefully you get an update, but just keep looking at Schoology to make sure you've completed all of the assignments, okay? So I'm gonna go ahead and stop this recording.